Mr. Chair. I think you'll note that this is my first call of the evening, and I'm pleased to take it on Clause 11 of the Royal Society Bill. Before I begin, I've got a couple of questions for the member. One relates specifically to a point that I'm going to come to, but my first is I have had some involvement with the Royal Society. I'm not a professional member, but as a high school student I was given some assistance to attend the Asia Pacific, the APEC Youth Science Festival in South Korea. Yes, I was. I can see that's left some of you impressed. There was a time when I was a reasonable science student. It was some years past. And my question is, can I become a member? If I've been a benefactor of the Royal Society, can I become a member? I'd also like to know if Chris Hipkins, given he's reading The New Scientist at present, whether he could become a member. I have a much more serious question to ask the member and the chair, though, because in Clause 11, where we're discussing honorary members, it's a very basic amendment to the current descriptor of who is able to become an honorary member. So currently it reads those who are in the realm of science or technology, but this clause makes an amendment to Clause 16.1 and substitutes that with science, technology or the humanities. Now, the member and the chair has already talked us through the process whereby someone moves through the different levels of membership within the Royal Society. So basically you can begin with your membership, which is for those who work in the applied, biological, earth, engineering, information, medical, physical and social services, mathematics and the humanities. So the distinction between that and the various levels for an honorary member is it enables a person who has rendered eminent service to the humanities be granted honorary membership. So this is a level for those who demonstrate distinction in their field. I guess my question for the member and the chair is, how is this addition to this clause likely to bring in new individuals who we aren't already recognising? Because I took a little bit of a look through those who are already falling under the category of honorary membership, and I thought it might assist members of this House if we use that as a base example of the kinds of eminent individuals who already hold the title of honorary member. And for me, I have a couple of questions as to whether or not we're likely to delve into new and specific fields. Because to me it seems that the humanities in many ways are already acknowledged via the honorary member title under the current definition. And whether or not honorary member actually already was a broadening of the powers via the Royal Society beyond what would be otherwise their traditional membership base. So I'm interested from the member and the chair if he could share with us whether the Select Committee discussed this at any great length, whether or not it was perceived that perhaps not enough honorary members were recognised in the fields of the humanities, whether or not perhaps a more purist view to those in the humanities needed to be taken. Now let me just expand on that with a few examples to assist members of the House who I can see are greatly intrigued by the contribution that I'm giving. Thank you, Jamie Lee Ross. Sits to attention. I can tell that he was a good pupil in school. So one of the first honorary members, I have to concede, actually, that when I was going through the honorary members to assist me with my analysis of this clause, that there were a number that I'm ashamed to admit whose names I didn't recognise. And that's another question I actually had for the member and the chair. What are the duties of honorary members? What is their expected role according to the Royal Society? Is it intended that an honorary member actually become an advocate on behalf of the Royal Society, or indeed someone who then takes a public role within their field? Because when I was scanning through, it did strike me that those more traditional members, those who might already be honorary members within the realms of the sciences, were the ones that I didn't recognise, whereas those who had already been recognised within the humanities were. And that was an interesting distinction for me. For instance, if I mention the name James Belich, I imagine that everyone in this House would know who I was talking about. He's an outstanding New Zealand historian. He is a specialist field in creating the global relevance of the New Zealand wars in a historical context. He's someone who's recognised for his ability to create intellectual excitement. Now, I'm interested with the member could talk to me a little bit more about whether or not... Mr Chair.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I will now respond to the questions raised by a number of members, and I thank members for the questions that they have raised on Clause 11. No, complete surprise to me, Mr Hardern, to be given questions, but it shows how much the Labour members of Parliament have focused on this bill and looked at the clauses to understand what they mean. And I'd be more than happy to take questions from National Party members when they work their way through the bill and raise those. And so more than happy to do that, Mr Chair. So the question, to answer questions about the status of honorary membership, it is necessary to go back and discuss the concept of ordinary membership, because in order to be an honorary member of the Royal Society, one has to be an ordinary member. And to be an ordinary member, the rules of the Royal Society, as opposed to the legislation, set out some minimum requirements to be an ordinary member. And those minimum requirements are... so this is once you've joined up, and as Moana Maki has done, you become a professional member. Some requirements. You need training, a university degree or its equivalent as determined by the Royal Society of New Zealand Council, and or 3 years professional experience within a field designated by the Council as relevant to the Society. So what Clause 11 is effectively doing is broadening that out to the humanities. So that is now a field designated as being relevant to the Royal Society. And then C, formal adherence to the Code of Professional Standards and Ethics. So the headings there are training, experience and practice. So having established those, once that's acknowledged, that's when you get to put the letters member of the Royal Society of New Zealand after your name, as our colleague Moana Maki is entitled to do. At that point, there is then the question of nominations for honorary members, and they can be made by any member of the Society at any time. Nominations for honorary members must be made to the Chief Executive of the Royal Society and shall include a statement of not more than 500 words giving reasons why the nominee is worthy of election. And then the Royal Society of New Zealand Council considers each nomination for an honorary member, and if approval is given, the nominee shall be invited to accept the appointment. At the same time as approval is given, arrangements shall be made for the presentation of a suitably inscribed certificate. Now, as with fellows and now with members, it's quite clear, to answer the question that Carol Beaumont raised, that in fact one does not have to be a resident of New Zealand to take up either of those honorary categories. And obviously when we see, as we come to it in Clause 12, we will see that the honorary fellows tend to be people who are based overseas as well. So honorary members and ordinary membership is linked, but they are separate categories, and it has clearly been the practice of the Royal Society to recognise people who perhaps have some connection with New Zealand but are not necessarily in New Zealand as honorary members, but also obviously honorary members can be New Zealanders as well. Mr Chair, just because it has come up in the context of ordinary membership, people can join online, and in fact there's a button on the Royal Society website which you can click and join, and it will cost members of this House $82 for an annual subscription to be a member of the Royal Society. Moana Maki has to pay more. She has to pay about $150, I think, as a professional member, and her membership fees are due. So I do hope that she does pay that. So that is the connection to answer the question that's been raised. In terms of the questions that Jacinda Ardern raised about the question of whether there had been any debate about what bringing the humanities in would mean in terms of the number of honorary memberships. That isn't something that was debated by the Select Committee, but the approach I know that the Royal Society has been taking to the inclusion of humanities is a very inclusive one, and it is part of their desire to expand the number of people who are actively involved in the Royal Society. So I believe that honorary membership, and in addition to ordinary membership, companions, fellows, will expand over time. time. The question of gender is a very interesting one, and I know that there are within the ranks of the Royal Society and within the ranks of the Fellows some very active female members who I know have been trying to encourage more involvement of women in sciences, and I know that there are some activities within the Royal Society by women fellows to try and encourage scientists. But as we've discussed variously through this debate, women are underrepresented in the sciences, and we obviously want to see more of that.
Dr. Regine Brazard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.